Greetings, dear 1000 PS friends. As you can see, you're getting content today from the backup, if I may call myself that. All my colleagues are out, driving rallies, on vacation or whatever, and no one was available who wanted or could ride the Panigale. I said, since I'm here anyway for motorcycles and horsepower, and unfortunately I don't have a vacation, I have to ride the Panigale today. So, I will also take you through how the new Panigale 2025 rides. Yes, as I mentioned, I'll walk you through how the Panigale rides. Now, in terms of technical innovations for the new 2025 Panigale V4 S, Howie has already broken it down beautifully for you in a studio video. He's gone into all the details, and I'll touch on a few technical updates that logically affect the riding experience. But for those who want the nitty-gritty details, you can check out Howie's video. It's got everything you need to know about the changes in technical data and so on. Today, we're going to focus on the most important thing, how it rides. As you can see, I'm standing here on the racetrack. We've only been riding on the racetrack today, specifically at the Vallelunga circuit. This was a new and fantastic track for me. If you ever get the chance, you should definitely come here. And as you can also see, right in front of me is the V4 S model. So today we're riding the S model and not the standard version, which is what we'll be talking about today. So let's get started. In most ride reviews, we usually start with the heart of the motorcycle, the engine. It's still, of course, a V4 engine. Mechanically, not much has changed in terms of its core components. What has changed, however, is that it now complies with the Euro 5 Plus homologation, which I believe was the biggest technical challenge for Ducati. Despite that, Ducati managed to squeeze out an extra 0.5 horsepower from this V4. The total power output is now exactly 216 horsepower, or to be precise, 215.5, which I always found to be too little. Finally, we've hit 216. Joking aside, Ducati says it's crucial that we generate more power while meeting new regulations, which was the biggest challenge. The torque also peaks higher up now. The most interesting changes to the engine are mainly due to the Euro 5 Plus homologation, and of course the larger exhaust system plays a key role here. The bike still features the under-engine exhaust, which is naturally very complex and had to become a bit heavier. We'll get to why the Panigale is still a bit lighter despite this later on. They had to make significant adjustments to meet the Euro 5 Plus requirements, and honestly, it's impressive that they managed to achieve this while maintaining the performance of the bike. I find that really, really cool, and it must have been a huge effort. There are some small technical changes too, like the intake funnels. The short ones got shorter and the long ones got longer. At a certain RPM, the funnels adjust upwards. But we won't get too deep into those technical details. What we really want to talk about is how the engine feels. The engine still delivers a lot of torque, and it's still a V4 that sits above the 1000cc category of superbikes. The engine still delivers a beautiful punch in the mid-range. To really compare it to the previous model, you'd have to ride them back to back and accelerate through the gears, but we still have that strong mid-range punch, and there are different power modes to choose from. Today we've only ridden in medium, high and full modes. In medium mode, the torque is reduced in the first 3 gears. We tried that out this morning when the conditions were still a bit tricky, but this afternoon we rode with full torque, and let me tell you, this V4 is just incredible. It's so much fun when you go full throttle. You really have to brace yourself to keep from getting your arms pulled out of their sockets. It's still that impressive. The performance this engine is capable of is truly mind-blowing even now. And that brings us to the next point. I mentioned ergonomics earlier, and it really plays a crucial role here. You can brace yourself nicely against the back and let the engine catapult you forward without it being too strenuous. Ducati put a lot of focus on making this bike more accessible and less physically demanding to ride, and that's where the new ergonomics come into play. The seat is a bit flatter now, meaning it doesn't rise as steeply toward the back. It's also wider and longer. The tank has been reshaped, providing excellent contact points. It's a bit longer and more rounded at the top, giving you a nice spot to brace yourself against. The foot pegs have also been moved inward, something I forgot to mention earlier. This creates an ergonomic setup that offers plenty of room, making it easier to ride more comfortably and with less effort. The more space you have, the easier it is to ride efficiently and conserve your energy. And the new ergonomics suited me really well. You have to admit, with older, well, not old, but past Ducatis, you always had to wrestle with the bike a bit when you wanted to ride fast. That's not the case with the 2025 V4 S. You can ride this bike fast and it lets you flow through the turns. After just a few laps, you start to trust the bike and you need less physical effort compared to the previous model. Previously, during hard braking phases, you'd get compressed, and that took a toll on your muscles, especially the chest muscles, but the new Panigale is much more accommodating in that regard. I can definitely confirm that. We had the older Panigale in our superbike comparison in Valencia not too long ago, and the difference is noticeable. That was just 3 months ago, so it's safe to say that these braking phases are now much more pleasant, which of course conserves energy and strength. Another feature that helps on those long straights is the slightly taller windscreen. You don't have to fold yourself up so extremely or press your head down onto the tank just to get good aerodynamics. You can, if you want, keep your head a bit higher and more forward. Of course, that comes down to personal preference. I always rest my head on the tank during the straights. But overall, the setup feels a bit more accessible, smoother, and I'd even say the ergonomics are more elegant now. Speaking of elegance, we now have to address the elephant in the room, the chassis. Specifically, the double-sided swing arm, now featured on the Panigale V4 S Ducati, mentioned that it was quite a challenge for them to incorporate a double-sided swing arm into a superbike, considering the whole Ducati DNA history and so on. In the end, the double-sided swing arm turned out to be the better concept for the demands of this motorcycle. To understand this, we need to take a brief look back in history. Think about the first Panigale V4, launched in 2018 with a single-sided swing arm. That means the development process for that model started around 2015. Back then, tire dimensions, grip levels, and compounds were completely different. The bike was developed for the tires available at that time. However, now with the significant changes in tire technology, including new dimensions and performance levels, the single-sided swing arm was no longer the best solution to extract maximum performance from modern tires. That's why, albeit reluctantly, Ducati decided to switch to a double-sided swing arm. Structurally, it offers several advantages, the most important being that it's lighter. According to Ducati, this entire rear assembly saves 2.7 kilograms. What's really interesting, if you ever get a chance to check out a Panigale V4 up close, is to feel the swing arm. It's incredibly thin-walled. There's basically nothing inside except a bit of dirt and chain grease, which doesn't really matter. It's truly a delicate piece of engineering. Ducati shared a bit about the development process, explaining how they start with a large, strongly dimensioned part and gradually remove material. This allows them to fine-tune the stiffness and minimize weight. Stiffness is an interesting topic here, specifically lateral stiffness, which has been reduced by 37% in the rear section, including the swing arm. This change is due to the tires, as more feedback is desired. Lateral stiffness refers to the way the swing arm moves laterally when viewed from the rear of the bike. Increasing lateral flexibility provides better feedback. The double-sided swing arm makes it easier to adjust lateral stiffness without altering torsional stiffness. Maintaining or reducing weight while balancing these factors would either be impossible or incredibly expensive without this design. That's why the decision was made to go with the double-sided swing arm. Additionally, the entire chassis has been reworked, including the front frame and main frame, to complement these changes. And now we have the Öhlins Generation 3.0 system, which Ducati calls DES 3.0, known as Smart EC 3.0 in the Fireblade. We've been familiar with this system since the 2024 Fireblade model. It's essentially the new setup from Öhlins, with the suspension fork and shock absorber. You can adjust the damping in many ways and, of course, tweak the preload settings. The system now has more events, as Öhlins calls them. This means it can recognize more phases of cornering, allowing it to fine-tune the damping with even more precision. It's a semi-active system that responds incredibly fast. How does this feel on the bike? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it feels incredibly smooth and accessible. The V4S now makes it easier to ride faster than ever before. This improvement comes from the great feedback you get from the chassis and the incredibly responsive handling when you lean into a corner. This morning we tested it with the softer race settings for the Öhlins damping elements, which felt great at medium speeds, but when you really want to push it, it's amazing to see how resistant the hardware is, and you can brake extremely late and accelerate hard, and the system handles it all. The Ducati test riders have posted some incredible lap times, braking super late and accelerating aggressively, and the system can absorb it all. The hardware is resilient and high-performing enough to give even the fastest track day riders confidence. The days when semi-active suspension systems didn't provide solid feedback, in my opinion, are long gone. A very important point regarding the handling: anyone who has ridden a Panigale V4 S before knows that, especially when the grip level starts to decrease, the bike has a tendency to wiggle a bit during acceleration. This was a major focus for Ducati in the development of the 2025 model, and they've really worked to eliminate that issue. The track we're on today is the perfect environment to test this, as it heavily challenges the bike in this specific scenario. You accelerate quite a bit while leaned over, and there are two spots on the track where you have to accelerate out of a lean, shift up through a short shift, and ideally hold the throttle steady. With many bikes, this is when you start to feel that wiggle or instability, which many riders are familiar with. But on the 2025 Panigale V4 S, that issue has been completely resolved, and I have to say it really impressed me. The stability during acceleration, the precision, and the control while cornering are all top-notch. There's barely any movement from the bike, which allows you to feel much more relaxed and confident while riding. So, we've talked about acceleration and cornering, now let's move on to braking. The new Brembo High Pure braking system is installed on this model. In terms of performance, it feels quite similar to the previous system. It doesn't grip any harder or offer a drastically more transparent braking feel, but it's top-notch braking hardware that meets all expectations and is incredibly reliable. The main improvement with this High Pure system seems to be in heat dissipation, which was optimized, and it looks like they succeeded, because even after 6, 7 or 8 fast laps, the brakes held up without fading and remained very stable. That was really impressive. Sticking with braking performance, we need to talk about the electronics, which, along with the chassis, represent the biggest update in terms of riding fast on the track. Ducati has introduced the so-called Race ECBS system, developed in collaboration with Bosch. This is quite interesting because we now have not 3 but 7 ABS modes. What's unique about this system is that it automatically engages the rear brake during hard braking. This happens in ABS levels 3 and 1. It sounds a bit complicated, but you can get used to it. The system helps with turning and cornering by automatically engaging the rear brake, something MotoGP riders and professionals already do manually. But for regular track day riders, this feature is very helpful. Personally, I struggle with manual rear braking, so having the system take care of it is really convenient and smooth. Through data recording, you can even see where the system engages the rear brake, either when entering or while in a corner, which adds an extra layer of control. This is really exciting because it gives you a much better feel for the bike, allowing you to corner with greater precision. How exactly it works is fascinating. My colleague Ralf Schneider from MotoGP actually dug into this. So if you're really interested in the details of the Race ECBS system, you can check out the MOTORRAD studio talk, especially during the presentation of the Panigale V4 S. Ralf got some inside information directly from the Bosch developers about how the system functions and what's required to use it. They go into much more detail there, so that's definitely worth watching. It would take too long to explain everything here, but feel free to switch over to MOTORRAD. We're always happy to see you on that channel. To summarize, the ECBS makes it significantly easier to corner in both settings, as it automatically engages the rear brake. It's also interesting that when you brake late with ABS Mode 1 active, the bike sometimes enters a slight slide. At first you might think, whoa, this feels like the rear is too light and I'm braking too late. But after a few laps you get used to it and realize it's just the system helping you turn tighter, which becomes almost unnoticeable after a while. It's a really smooth and supportive feature. Delving further into the electronics, we quickly get to the concept of Ducati Vehicle Observe, which you could translate as Ducati Vehicle Monitoring. According to Ducati, this technology has been transferred from MotoGP. What it means is that based on existing data from the IMU ABS sensors and suspension data, though there are no sensors for suspension travel or speeds, plus inputs like throttle position and brake pressure, Ducati simulates 70 sensors. These simulated sensors help refine the bike's behavior even more, allowing for even more precise regulation. It's definitely a complex topic, and Ducati isn't too keen on fully revealing the inner workings of this system. I've tried to ask more questions about it, and I'll keep digging to see what more I can uncover. Hopefully we'll be able to go into greater detail during the studio talk to provide a clearer explanation. At the end of the day, the key idea is that the system allows the bike to respond even more precisely to the rider's actions. It can take into account factors like the rider's weight, riding style, and the grip level of the track. This really dives deep into the technical side of things, and we'll aim to explore it more thoroughly in the studio talk, where we can take a closer look at the technology Ducati has implemented in this bike. Let's leave it at this for now. The traction control, wheelie control and slide control all work flawlessly, each operating separately and with very fine interventions, which you can see clearly in the data recording. Before you even lose grip, you can observe these subtle adjustments being made, particularly in the corners, where the electronics step in just enough to keep things in check. What's great is that it feels so subtle that you barely notice the system intervening, thanks to how finely it operates. I think it's fantastic. Really top-notch performance. Speaking of electronics, we should also mention the dashboard before wrapping up. It's larger now, almost like a big smartphone, and it's incredibly easy to read. The menu is well structured, and I really like the way everything is controlled. At this price point, around 35,000 euros for the V4 S in Germany, it's something you'd almost expect in a bike of this class, but I have to say they've done an excellent job. Now, on to the final verdict for the 2025 Panigale V4 S. So, this is the fourth generation of the Panigale V4. As you may have noticed, I'm not going to get into the design today. That's something you can discuss in the comments. Personally, I think the bike is beautiful, but feel free to share your thoughts on whether you like it or not. Single-sided swing arm, double-sided swing arm, and all that. Let's hear what you think. What I can tell you is that this bike rides incredibly well. In every aspect, I feel like it's a step up. The braking performance has definitely improved. The cornering is fantastic. And most importantly for me, the stability during acceleration has really advanced. That tendency to wiggle is almost gone, and the bike feels much more accessible while still being lightning fast. That's my verdict on the Panigale. I'm not going to get into a debate about price or design. It's an excellent machine, and if you ever get the chance to try it out on a racetrack or during a track day, I highly recommend it. Just be warned, you might find yourself digging into your wallet for some funds that may not be there. Let us know what you think about the Panigale V4 S in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, like, share and subscribe. Be sure to check out the studio talks from MOTORRAD, where we dive even deeper into the race ECBS and Ducati Vehicle Observe technologies. It's a bit too much to cover here, but I look forward to seeing you there. Until next time, take care. Ciao.